So last week, I know we had a little issue with the buttons. I looked into it, and we're going to redo this assignment just a little different. What? Half of you weren't able to do it. Like it wasn't working. So,
I love the first button for specs.
We're going to do it again, and you're going to take notes on how to do it.
Yay!
So everybody look up at the board. This folder that you guys created called First Scenes, I want you to rename it First Buttons. Now, again, we're gonna do this a little different. So I'm gonna create a new file, and this is gonna be full HD. Now, if I'm going to close my actions window. If I zoom out, you can see that this is my stage right here. Everything outside the stage I won't be able to see. Now, the beauty is we already created graphics last week inside this folder called First Button, and I called mine First Scene, BG, and then Second Scene, BG. So I think just to keep this straight in my head, I'm going to call this button instead of scene. Going to rename these. So I don't get confused. And last week's file I'm just going to throw into the trash, just like that. So I've got 3 files in here, 2 JPEGs and the original Photoshop file. That's what I want. Now, in Animate, you remember how we get those pictures? Library. So I click on Library. There you go. File, import to Library. I know a lot of you forgot that, so I want you to write it down, because I don't want to have to tell you again and again and again. It's up under File, and you go to Import, and then you go to Import to Library. That is how we're getting our pictures into our file so we can use them. When I do that, I can look inside the folder. I'm going to select the 2 JPEGs, not the Photoshop file. We had a few people last week try to import the Photoshop file, and that was one of the reasons why your file didn't work. It has to be your JPEGs. And hit open. So now these 2 images are in my library ready to use. Again, that's under File, Import, Import to Library. This layer in the timeline, instead of it being called Layer 1, I'm going to rename it Background 1. I want you to write that down on your piece of paper. Rename Layer 1 to Background 1. After you've done that, you can drag out the first background onto your file, and it should be sized perfectly, because last week we created these to be sized for that full HD file. Now this only lasts 1 keyframe. How do we extend it out on our timeline? F5, that's right. So I'm going to extend it out 30 frames. Write that down. Your first background should last 30 frames. I'm going to create a new layer. And what am I going to call this? I'm going to call it Actions with an S. A lot of you only put Action. You forgot that S. And that was one of the issues that we were running into last week as well. The layer should be called actions, A-C-T-I-O-N-S.
Wait,
That's,
it
yes.
Does the A thing count?
Because when you automatically put code snippets in, it looks for the layer called actions. If it doesn't find it, it'll create another layer, a duplicate layer. You'll have an action layer and an actions layer, and it messes stuff up. Now, at the end, on frame number 30, I want to pick a point in time, this exact point, to put my stop action. How do I tell the timeline that the stop action should only be here and not here? F6, that's right. So you hit F6 to create a keyframe, and this is where you put your actions. So, on your piece of paper, I want you to put down, create an F6 at the very end of the actions layer. I'm going to open up my actions window. And if you guys remember, we can type it. Or you can just go up here to where it says code snippets. Look under action scripts. Look under timeline navigation. And just double click. Say stop at this frame. And it will type it for you. All this in gray is, it doesn't matter. Whatever's inside these little guys is canceled out, and if it is just for humans to read, the computer won't read it. It'll think it's just junk. So this is just explaining what this code is that it just inserted because we're using code snippets. Now the reason I put a stop action in is because I don't want it to go any further on the timeline. I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to call it background 2. Write that down. So I have one layer that's called background 1. This has my picture on it, and that's why it's in gray. And our keyframe is filled with black. We have an actions layer. At the very end, you can see there's a little tiny A right there. That means that that action script is on that keyframe. Now on background 2 layer, I'm going to drag my second picture, put it on my stage. Now the reason I can't see my first picture is because my second picture is covering it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select these frames, and I'm going to push them out, all the way out here.
Is that just a drag and drop?
So it starts on frame number 31. Yeah, you can just literally drag the keyframe, the frames out. What'd you say? All right. Yeah, we're not going to do scenes. A lot of you guys are experiencing issues with your scenes, so we're just going to skip that. We're not going to do it. We're just going to have everything contained on one scene, and it'll be a really long scene because we have 30 frames of this picture where it stops, and then we'll have 30 more frames of this background picture. And what do you think I'm going to put at the end of this one? Stop. Am I going to create another actions layer? What do you guys think? No. We already have one. Let's just use it. So, on my actions layer here, on this layer, I'm going to hit F6 at the very end of this one. And I'm going to use my actions to stop it out here. Does everybody understand what's happening on my timeline and how I've organized this all? Any questions? I want you to create this with your file. I'll give you a few minutes. Let's go.